With the launch of our game Fly Together, we sat down to discuss some of our favorite parts from the development. Okay, another thing that I think is amazing is yet another thing that people won't notice if it just works, right? And that has to do with the drop-in style of multiplayer game that we've tried to make here, right? You know, because Fly This, which was sort of like the bones that this was made on, right, was a single-player experience. And we wanted this to be both a single-player experience, but also be a multiplayer experience. How do we do that?
The original objective was we want people to be able to play through all the campaign levels, and they shouldn't have to, like, oh, we're 4 players, we can't play, or oh, we're 1 player, we can't play. It should be playable with any number of players, right? And we kind of bit off more than we could chew, almost, without realizing it, because going through the game and realizing there's like, oh, this level is only really fun if you're only controlling 2 airplanes. But if you're 4 players, now you're fighting over who gets to play the game, and that's not very good, right? So it was like an iterative process where we take the original game, we put in like multiplayer control so that each player can play with each their Joy-Con, and then we start playing some levels, and we realize some levels are too big for 2 players, some levels are too small for 2 players. The original design doesn't really hold up. So what do? I guess what we have to do is every single level in the game now scales with the amount of players that you are, and there will always be enough airplanes for each player to control, and all the score goals and everything will scale accordingly so that you always feel properly challenged, not too hard, not too easy, no matter what number of players that you are.
Yeah.
And this was all like a piecewise iterative discovery. We made some drastic changes to the base game that I honestly think today are like, the game is way better for it than what the original game was, at least in my personal opinion. I like playing this one way better. A big part of the original game and the original draw and difficulty of the game was that, for example, if you crash an airplane once, you lose the game and you have to start over.
Yeah.
And we realized, because we were testing this a lot, right? Some players, some of the more timid players would play the game, and then they would make a mistake and they would crash an airplane, and then the level would stop. And then the 3 other or 5 other players in the party would all look at the person and go, "You crashed the airplane. It's your fault. We're not having fun anymore." And we're like, "No, that's not good. That's not good." Yeah. So we changed it so that crashing an airplane doesn't stop the game. And we're like, "Oh, but what if? But then you crash your airplane, and then you don't have an airplane to fly around with anymore. Now you're still just kind of sitting out and waiting for everyone else to finish their session. What if you can call back in airplanes you have crashed?"
Yeah.
And one of my colleagues go, "I don't know, that sounds kind of like the game becomes too easy then." And we tested it out, we built the change, we found out it's actually way more fun. Like, you crash your airplane, you get to come back right into the action, you lose a bit of time, you lose a bit of points, that's fine. But we just scale the numbers accordingly so that it still feels super satisfying to like pull off a good performance. And like, if you find that a level is hard or your players are inexperienced and they crash a lot and they laugh a lot over all the stupid mistakes that they do, you still might actually like crawl your way through like to a finish, and it'll feel really good regardless. A lot of iteration is what it took to like land on a version of this gameplay that actually makes sense to like play 2 players. Your friend comes in the door, "Yo, Johnny, join us. Why won't you?" Throw a Joy-Con at their face. They click a button, they check in, the level automatically, "Oh wait, you're 3 players now instead of 2. It just changes everything. I'm super relieved to see it done.
Yeah, me too. Because it's really one of those cases where people probably won't notice. Hopefully they won't notice, right? Grading the difficulty in a game like this is so important, right? It's what makes the difference if whether or not you're having fun or not, and whether or not you're being, challenged. I played this game with my 7-year-old son, right? And so he's then now become a super pro, right, at it. But to begin with, like, we wanted to have a game that was super inclusive. You could play with anyone, right? I think motion control is kind of part of this. Motion control is like this really physical thing where people can really understand it. You don't have to be a gamer to point that thing. This is why the Wii was so successful, right? In so many other demographics.
Yeah, I remember.
And I feel like this game has some of that, and we wanted to mirror that. We couldn't take the because of course we're coming from Conduct Together, which is a very difficult co-op game. It is very punishing. There's a lot of finger pointing in that game, and we wanted to try something else with this game where if you're a pro team playing it, there's definitely goals for you to aim for, right? It definitely it scales and gets really hard. But we also wanted everyone to be able to pick it up and have fun playing it. And I think it's the game that we've made that I have been able to play with the most people around me. And like family members and friends and people who are maybe not as hardcore a gamer as my son is. I think the scaling of difficulty and the drop-in style of multiplayer is pretty cool. Of course, it's more fun to play together. I think that's in the DNA of the game. It's very much about coordinating things and yelling at each other and stuff like that. But you could totally play the campaign alone and have a good experience doing that.